If you like stories about unfaithful husbands, this channel is for you. Give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Some stories are uncomfortable because they don't offer excuses. I stopped believing in coincidences the day I noticed Mark had started closing the bathroom door when he showered. We'd been married for 11 years. The bathroom door had never been closed. Not once. Not when he was sick. Not when he was tired. Not even during our worst arguments. But for the past 3 weeks, I'd hear the lock click. Soft. Deliberate. Like he was trying not to make it obvious. I didn't say anything. I told myself it was nothing. People need privacy sometimes. People change small habits. It doesn't mean anything. But every morning, as I stood in the hallway with my coffee, listening to the water run and knowing that door was locked, something inside me began to calcify. It wasn't suspicion yet. It was colder than that. It was the feeling of already knowing something you refuse to acknowledge. Mark was the CFO of my company. That's how we met. He joined when we were still a startup, back when I was working 16-hour days and eating ramen in my office at midnight. He believed in my vision when investors laughed me out of boardrooms. He stayed late, built the financial models that saved us during the Series A crash, and never once made me feel like I owed him anything. When he proposed, he did it in the office, after a funding round closed. No ring, just him, exhausted, saying, "I don't want to build anything else unless it's with you." I said yes, because I believed him. Now he closed the bathroom door. That morning, I walked into the kitchen and found him already dressed. Full suit, cologne. He usually waited until after breakfast to get ready. He poured himself coffee without looking at me. "Early meeting?" I asked. "Yeah, quarterly review with the department heads." I nodded. I knew the meeting wasn't until 10. It was 7:30. "You look nice," I said. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Thanks." He kissed my forehead on his way out. It felt like an apology for something I wasn't supposed to know about yet. I watched him walk to his car through the kitchen window. He checked his phone before starting the engine. His face changed, softened in a way it hadn't softened for me in months. Then he drove away, and I stood there with my coffee getting cold, wondering when exactly I'd become someone my husband needed to hide things from. I spent the entire morning trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. I had board meetings, budget approvals, a product launch in 2 weeks. I didn't have time to dissect whether my husband's shower habits meant anything. But between emails, I kept thinking about the way he'd buttoned his cuffs that morning. Slowly, carefully, like he was performing for someone. At 11, I walked past the finance wing. Mark's office door was half open. I could hear his voice, low and warm, the kind of voice he used to use with me. "No, I know. I'll handle it. Trust me." A pause. "I can't talk about this here." Another pause. Longer. "Tonight, I promise." I kept walking. My heels clicked against the marble floor, steady and even, like nothing had changed. I smiled at 2 junior analysts on my way to the elevator. They smiled back. Everything looked normal. Everything was normal, except the part where I was now listening to my husband's phone conversations through half-open doors, like a stranger in my own company. Back in my office, I opened our shared calendar. The quarterly review was marked for 10 a.m. Mark had created a new event at 7 p.m. Dinner meeting. Investor relations. No location. No attendees listed. I stared at it for a long time. Then I marked myself as attending. He changed it to private within 5 minutes. I sat very still. My hands were flat on the desk. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips, but my face was calm. I'd negotiated with venture capitalists who tried to steal my IP. I'd fired a VP who embezzled $40,000. I'd built a $60 million company from nothing. I knew how to keep my face calm, but I couldn't stop looking at that calendar event. Private. As if I were someone he needed to hide things from now. I called my assistant. "Clear my schedule after 6. "All of it?" "Yes." I didn't know what I was planning. I just knew I needed to see what happened at 7 o'clock. I needed to see who Mark was becoming when he thought I wasn't watching. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was the CEO, the one who built this entire company, and now I was clearing my schedule to spy on my own CFO, my own husband. The rest of the day moved in a strange rhythm, too fast and too slow at the same time. I approved budgets. I reviewed marketing decks. I smiled in meetings. But underneath everything, I was aware of a new feeling, the sensation of living in a house that's already been broken into, but nothing's been stolen yet. Just rearranged. Just wrong enough that you notice. At lunch, Mark texted me, "Swamped today. Eating at my desk." We used to eat lunch together 3 times a week. It was our thing. 30 minutes where we weren't CEO and CFO, just two people who still liked each other. Or used to. I texted back, "No problem. I ate alone in my office. The salmon tasted like nothing." At 3, I had a video call with our lead developer. Halfway through, I saw Mark walk past my office with someone. I couldn't see who, but I heard her laugh. It was bright, young, the kind of laugh that makes you remember you used to laugh like that, before you learned how much it costs to build something real. After the call ended, I sat in silence. I opened LinkedIn. I typed in Mark's name, scrolled through his connections. There were hundreds. I looked for recent additions. There, 3 weeks ago, Rebecca Chen, senior financial analyst. Her profile photo showed a woman in her late 20s, dark hair, confident smile. Stanford MBA, 2 years at Goldman before joining us. I recognized her now. She'd started in Mark's department a month ago. I'd seen her twice, once in the elevator, once in a presentation. She had that quality some young professionals have. Hungry, brilliant, unaware of how much damage ambition mixed with opportunity can cause. I closed the browser. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Mark worked with dozens of people. He hired her because she was qualified. The laugh meant nothing. The closed calendar event meant nothing. The locked bathroom door meant nothing. But I couldn't stop my hands from shaking as I typed up an email to the board. Routine stuff. Quarterly projections. I misspelled 3 words and had to retype it twice. I, who never made mistakes, was falling apart over a calendar notification and a laugh I'd heard through a doorway. That's when I knew. Not what was happening. Not yet. But that something was. And that I was already preparing for it. At 5:30, I told my assistant I was leaving early. She looked surprised. I never left early. But she didn't ask questions. People don't question CEOs, even when they should. I sat in my car in the parking garage. I didn't turn on the engine. I just sat there, watching employees leave for the day through my rearview mirror. Young analysts in cheap suits, directors in expensive ones. The entire ecosystem I'd built, flowing out of the building like water, going home to their lives, their problems, their marriages. Mark's car was still there, 3 rows over. I could see it if I turned my head slightly to the left. I didn't turn my head. I kept my eyes on the mirror. At 6:15, I saw him. He walked out of the building checking his phone. Then he stopped, looked around, like he was waiting for someone. Rebecca Chen came out 2 minutes later. They didn't touch. They didn't stand close. They just walked to their cars. Separately, coincidentally, as if they'd simply left at the same time. But I saw the way Mark glanced at her before getting into his car. I saw the small smile, the one I used to receive. They drove out in separate directions. I followed Mark. I kept 3 cars between us. I'd read somewhere that's what you're supposed to do. Though I'd never imagined I'd need to know how to follow my own husband through city traffic like a detective in a bad movie. He drove toward downtown. I knew where he was going before he got there. Mercado, the Italian place on 5th Street, where we had our first date, where he'd proposed. He parked. Went inside. I parked across the street. I sat there for 20 minutes. I could see him through the window sitting at a corner table. Our table. He ordered wine. He checked his phone. He looked nervous. Excited. Young. Then Rebecca arrived. She wore a black dress. Not provocative. Just elegant. Professional. But I saw the way she'd done her hair. The way she'd chosen her jewelry. These weren't choices you make for a business dinner. Mark stood when she approached. They didn't hug. They didn't kiss. They just sat down, and he poured her wine, and they started talking, and laughing, and I watched them through a restaurant window like a ghost haunting her own life, unable to reach through the glass and ask, when did this become more important than what we built together? I didn't go inside. I didn't confront them. I just drove home. The house was dark when I arrived. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the living room in the dark, still wearing my coat, and I waited. Mark came home at 10:30. He walked in smiling, humming something under his breath. Then he saw me sitting there and the humming stopped. "Hey," he said. "You're home early." "So are you," I said. My voice was steady, calm. CEO voice. "Yeah, the investor dinner wrapped up faster than expected." "Which investor?" He hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. But I caught it. "The Sanderson Group. They're considering a Series C participation. I nodded. We didn't have a Series C planned. The Sanderson Group had backed our competitor last year. But I didn't say any of that. I just nodded. How was your day? He asked. Fine. Productive. He loosened his tie. I'm exhausted. I think I'm going to shower and head to bed. Okay. He started toward the stairs, then stopped, turned back. Are you coming to bed soon? In a bit. I have some emails to finish. He nodded. Started up the stairs. Stopped again. Everything okay? He asked. This was my chance. I could have asked him directly. I could have told him what I saw, but something stopped me. Maybe I wanted him to tell me on his own. Maybe I wanted to see how long he'd keep lying. Maybe I was just afraid of what would happen once I said the words out loud. Everything's fine, I said. He went upstairs. I heard the bathroom door close, the lock click, the shower start. I sat in the dark for another hour. Then I went to my office, the small one at home, the one where I'd drafted the first business plan for the company on a laptop that cost more than my rent. I opened my personal laptop. I logged into the company's security system. We had cameras in the hallways, in the parking garage, not in the offices. I'd always believed in giving people privacy, but the hallways captured enough. I scrolled back through today's footage. There, Mark and Rebecca leaving a conference room at 4 p.m. They'd been alone in there for 40 minutes. When they came out, Rebecca was adjusting her blouse. Mark was putting on his jacket. Maybe they'd just been working. Maybe the blouse had gotten wrinkled from sitting. Maybe I was seeing things that weren't there. But I kept scrolling back. Yesterday, the day before, 2 weeks ago. Conference rooms, empty hallways, parking garage. Always separate, always careful, always just plausibly professional. Except once, 3 days ago, evening, everyone else had left. Security footage from the parking garage showed them standing between two cars. No one else around. Rebecca said something. Mark laughed. Then, so quick I almost missed it, he touched her face. Just for a second. Just his fingertips against her cheek. Then they got in their separate cars and drove away. I watched that 5-second clip 17 times. Then I closed the laptop. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to Mark in the dark, listening to him breathe, wondering if he was really asleep or just pretending. The way I was pretending everything was fine. At 3 a.m., his phone vibrated on the nightstand. Once. Twice. 3 times. He didn't wake up. I waited 10 minutes. Then I carefully reached over him and picked up his phone. I knew his passcode. We'd never hidden things from each other. Until now, apparently. 3 texts from RC. Thank you for tonight. I know this is complicated, but I don't regret it. When can I see you again? I put the phone back. Mark stirred but didn't wake. I got out of bed, went downstairs, made coffee I wouldn't drink, watched the sun come up through the kitchen window. Rebecca Chen, RC, Senior Financial Analyst, Stanford MBA. 27 years old according to her employee file. She'd been hired 6 weeks ago. Mark had interviewed her personally, had insisted she was the best candidate despite 3 other qualified applicants with more experience. I pulled up her file on my phone, read through her resume, her cover letter, her reference letters. One of her references was from Goldman Sachs. The name looked familiar. I cross-referenced it with Mark's LinkedIn. They'd worked together. 7 years ago, before Mark joined my company, before we got married. I opened Mark's LinkedIn again, found Rebecca in his connections, clicked on her profile, scrolled down to experience. Goldman Sachs, same department, same years. They'd known each other before. He'd never mentioned it. Not when he hired her, not when he introduced her to the team, not once. I sat there holding my phone and I understood something then. This wasn't new. Maybe the affair was new, maybe the touching was new, but the connection, the history, that had been there all along. He'd brought his ex into my company, into my life, and he'd pretended she was just another hire. I finished my coffee. It had gone cold. When Mark came downstairs at 6:30, I was sitting at the kitchen table, still in yesterday's clothes, looking at my phone. You're up early, he said. Couldn't sleep, I said. Everything okay? I looked up at him, really looked at him. Tried to see the man who'd proposed to me in my office. The one who'd said he didn't want to build anything unless it was with me. I couldn't find him. I need to ask you something, I said. He poured himself coffee. Sure. Rebecca Chen. You hired her 6 weeks ago. He froze. Just for a second. But I saw it. Yeah. She's brilliant. Great addition to the team. You worked with her before, at Goldman. Another pause. Did I? I don't remember. That was years ago. Mark. He turned to face me. What? Did you work with her at Goldman? Maybe. I worked with a lot of people there. Stop lying. The words came out harder than I'd intended. Mark's expression changed. Defensive. Caught. I'm not lying. I just didn't remember. You remembered enough to hire her. What are you implying? And there it was. The moment. I could back down. I could pretend I was just asking about hiring practices. I could let it go. But I'd already seen his fingertips against her cheek. I'd already read her text messages. I'd already watched him lie to my face about an investor dinner that never happened. I'm not implying anything, I said. I'm telling you that I know. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. Mark stood there with his coffee mug, and I watched him decide which version of the truth to tell me. I could see it happening. The calculations, the weighing of options, the desperate internal math of someone trying to figure out exactly how much I knew and how little he could admit to. Know what? He finally said. And that's when something broke in me. Not my heart. That would come later. What broke was simpler. My willingness to keep pretending this conversation could be salvaged with anything less than complete honesty. I saw you, I said, last night, at Mercado, with her. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. It wasn't. That was just a business dinner. You took her to the restaurant where you proposed to me. I didn't think about that. It was just. And 3 days ago, in the parking garage, you touched her face. His face went white. You've been watching the security footage? It's my company, Mark. My cameras, my security system. That was nothing. She had something in her eye. Stop. I stood up. Just stop. I read her texts. I don't regret it. When can she see you again? What doesn't she regret, Mark? He set his coffee down. His hands were shaking. Good. At least I wasn't the only one falling apart. It's not what you think, he said. Then tell me what it is. He looked at me for a long moment. I saw him realize that there was no good way out of this. No clever explanation. No half-truth that would satisfy me. We kissed, he said quietly. Once, 2 weeks ago, after a late meeting. It was a mistake. A mistake you've been having dinner with. A mistake you've been texting. A mistake you've been lying to me about. I was trying to end it. That's what last night was about. I was telling her it couldn't continue. That's why she texted you at 3 a.m. thanking you? That's why she asked when she could see you again? He had no answer for that. I walked to the kitchen island, put my hands flat on the granite. I needed something solid to hold on to. The whole house felt like it was tilting. How long have you known her? I asked. I told you. We worked together years. How long, Mark? He closed his eyes. We dated. At Goldman. Before I met you. It ended badly. When she applied here, I didn't think. I thought enough time had passed. I thought it would be fine. You hired your ex-girlfriend. You brought her into my company, into our life, and you never told me. I didn't think it mattered. Didn't think it mattered? I laughed. It came out wrong. Too sharp, too broken. You didn't think it mattered that you hired someone you used to sleep with? Someone you clearly never stopped having feelings for? That's not fair. None of this is fair, Mark. You've been lying to me for 6 weeks, maybe longer. You've been taking her to our restaurant, kissing her in conference rooms, texting her at 3 a.m., and you want to talk about fair? He ran his hands through his hair. I recognized the gesture. It was what he did when he was stressed, when quarterly numbers didn't add up, when investors pushed back on valuations. But this wasn't a spreadsheet he could fix. This was us, disintegrating in our kitchen over cold coffee and lies. I love you, he said. I love you, and I made a terrible mistake. But it's over. I swear to you, it's over. Is it? I pulled out my phone, showed him the texts. These are from 3 hours ago. He looked at the screen. His face crumpled. I'll block her. I'll cut off all contact. I'll do whatever you want. What I want? I set the phone down carefully. I want to go back 6 weeks. I want you to tell me the truth when you hired her. I want you to remember that you built this company with me, that you married me, that you promised me you didn't want to build anything else unless it was with me. But I can't have any of that, because you already took it away. We can fix this, he said desperately. Couples therapy, time, whatever you need. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the man I'd spent 11 years loving, the man who'd believed in my vision when no one else did, the man who'd proposed to me in my office because he couldn't wait another day. That man was gone. Or maybe he'd never existed. Maybe I'd just been too busy building a company to notice I'd married someone who would bring his ex-girlfriend into our life and lie about it for 6 weeks. I built this company from nothing, I said quietly. I gave up sleep, relationships, years of my life. I sacrificed everything for it. And you were part of that. You helped me build it. But it was always mine, Mark. The vision was mine. The risk was mine. The company is mine. What are you saying? I'm saying you have a choice. You can resign, effective immediately, or I can fire you. Either way, by 9 a.m., you won't work here anymore. His face went pale. You can't. I can. And I will. You violated company policy by having an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. You compromised your position by hiring someone you had a prior relationship with and failing to disclose it. You've created a liability for the company. Those are all fireable offenses. This is about us, not the company. Everything is about the company, Mark. That's what you never understood. This isn't just where we work. This is what I built. This is my life. And you brought her into it. You compromised it. You chose her over it. Over me. I chose wrong, he said, his voice breaking. I know I chose wrong. But please, Rebecca's fired too, I continued, my voice steady now, clinical. Effective immediately. Security will escort you both out this morning. HR will handle the paperwork. You'll receive your severance package, standard terms, nothing vindictive. I'm not going to destroy you, Mark. I'm just going to remove you from my life, from my company, from everything I built that you decided wasn't enough. You're destroying our marriage over a kiss? No, I said. You destroyed our marriage when you hired her, when you lied, when you chose to have dinner with her instead of coming home to me, when you locked the bathroom door and pretended I wouldn't notice. You destroyed this weeks ago. I'm just acknowledging it. He stood there, coffee forgotten, looking at me like he'd never seen me before. And maybe he hadn't. Maybe he'd only ever seen the version of me that needed him, the startup founder who worked 16-hour days and ate ramen and needed someone to believe in her. He'd never considered what would happen when that version of me grew into someone who could fire him without hesitation. What about us? He whispered. What about our marriage? I picked up my phone, started typing an email to HR. I'll have my lawyer contact you about separation papers. You can stay at a hotel tonight. I'll have your things packed by the weekend. You're not even going to try to save this? I looked up from my phone. Why would I save something you already killed? By 8 a.m., I was in my office. By 8:30, HR had prepared the termination paperwork. By 9, security was escorting Mark and Rebecca out of the building. I didn't watch. I didn't need to. I just sat at my desk reviewing Q3 projections, while my husband's entire professional life ended 3 floors below me. My assistant brought me coffee. Are you okay? She asked carefully. I'm fine, I said. And the terrible thing was, I meant it. The board called an emergency meeting at 10. I explained the situation in clinical terms. Inappropriate relationship, failure to disclose prior connections, liability concerns. They nodded. They asked if I was sure. I was sure. They asked if I needed time off. I didn't. By noon, word had spread through the company. I could feel people looking at me differently in the hallways. Not with pity. I wouldn't have tolerated that. With something else. Respect, maybe. Or fear. It was hard to tell the difference sometimes. I worked late that night. And the night after. And the one after that. People kept asking if I was okay. I kept saying yes. And I was. The company didn't fall apart. The quarterly numbers came in strong. The product launch went perfectly. Everything I'd built continued exactly as planned. I just did it alone now. Mark texted me twice in the first week. Long messages about mistakes and regrets and love. I didn't respond. My lawyer responded for me with separation paperwork. He signed it without negotiation. The divorce took 6 months. Clean, professional, emotionless. We divided assets with the same efficiency we'd once divided company responsibilities. He got the house. I didn't want it anymore. I got the company. That was all that mattered. A year later, I was closing a Series C round. Biggest funding round in the company's history. The investors loved our numbers, our growth trajectory, our leadership stability. One of them asked about our CFO transition. I heard there was some turnover last year. We made some necessary changes, I said smoothly. Our current CFO has been excellent. The company's stronger for it. He nodded. Everyone nodded. No one asked about Mark specifically. In the business world, people disappear all the time. Failed executives, terminated employees, ex-husbands who made the mistake of thinking they were irreplaceable. I heard through industry connections that Mark had landed at a smaller firm. Good role, decent pay, nothing special. Rebecca had moved to Chicago. I didn't ask for details. I didn't care. Sometimes, late at night in my new apartment, minimalist, expensive, nothing like the house we'd shared, I thought about that morning in the kitchen, about the way Mark had looked at me when I told him to leave, like I'd become someone he didn't recognize. The truth was simpler. I'd always been this person, the one who could make hard decisions, the one who could cut losses without hesitation, the one who'd built a $60 million company by refusing to accept anything less than excellence. He'd just never expected me to apply those same standards to him. I didn't miss him. I missed the version of him that had existed before Rebecca. But that version, if it had ever been real, was gone long before I fired him. I'd just been the last one to accept it. The company hit $100 million in valuation 18 months after Mark left. I rang the bell at the stock exchange opening, smiled for photographs, gave interviews about women in tech, about building businesses, about resilience. No one asked about my divorce. If they did, I had an answer prepared. Sometimes personal and professional priorities diverge. I chose to focus on what I'd built. Professional, clean, true enough. At night, alone in my apartment, I sometimes still thought about the bathroom door. That locked door that had been my first warning. The small intimacy that disappeared before everything else fell apart. I didn't cry about it. I didn't rage. I just acknowledged it. The way you acknowledge a scar. Something that happened. Something that changed you. Something you survived. I went on dates occasionally. Smart men, successful men, men who understood business and ambition. None of them lasted long. They'd ask what happened to my marriage, and I'd give them the rehearsed answer, and they'd nod like they understood, but they didn't understand. They thought I'd chosen the company over my marriage. They were wrong. I'd chosen myself. The version of myself that had worked 16-hour days and risked everything and built something real. The version that refused to let anyone, not even someone I loved, compromise what I'd created. Mark had wanted me to choose him over the company, to forgive the lies, accept the betrayal, rebuild something broken. He'd never understood that asking me to do that was asking me to stop being the person he'd fallen in love with in the first place. 3 years after the divorce, I was approached about an acquisition. Tech giant. Massive offer. Enough to retire at 45 and never work again. I turned it down because the company wasn't just a business. It was proof. Proof that I could build something lasting. Proof that I didn't need anyone to validate my vision. Proof that the girl who'd eaten ramen in a startup office had become someone who could fire her own husband and keep building without missing a step. Sometimes I wondered if Mark thought about that morning in the kitchen, if he regretted the choices that led him there, if he understood finally what he'd thrown away. But mostly, I didn't think about Mark at all. I thought about quarterly projections, about product roadmaps, about the next funding round, about the empire I'd built, the one that had survived his betrayal, and my devastation and come out stronger. The bathroom door in my new apartment never locked. I lived alone. There was no one to hide from. No one whose small changes I needed to track. No one whose betrayal I needed to anticipate. Just me, and the company, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that when everything fell apart, I'd been strong enough to let it. By the time regret arrives, the door is usually closed. See you in the next video.